have had to evolve decade by decade to keep you watching us.
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's
hormones.
Sheesh.
We got a lady who says different.
I don't remember anything about last night. Hands against the wall, feet apart.
I'm the victim, not her.
Yeah, let's say that. That sounds simple enough.
Join us, won't you?
On March 2nd, 1958, KTVU first signed on the air from its studio in the abandoned Paris Theater in downtown Oakland. 4 months later, the station moved to this building in Jack London Square. Constructed cheaply by the Port of Oakland out of material gathered from a demolished pier, the facility was hardly state-of-the-art. In those days, our live broadcasts were regularly interrupted by rumbling trains, boat whistles, and foghorns. Channel 2 was the Bay Area's first independent television station. Channels 4, 5, and 7 were affiliated with national networks, NBC, CBS, and ABC, which supplied most of their programs. To receive those shows, all they had to do was flip a switch, but KTVU had to program, create, or acquire its entire broadcast day. Back then, we produced a lot of talk shows. Celebrities often showed up at the station to plug their latest projects. Imagine the delight these kids felt when they ran into their idol, Liberace. The hosts of our talk shows included Pat Michaels, Hilly Rose, Jack Carney, and Don Sherwood. Sherwood was a somewhat controversial KSFO DJ, and Channel 2 trumpeted that fact in its ads. Early on, you could always turn to Channel 2 to see live broadcasts of wrestling and roller derby. Of course, we couldn't create original shows all day long, so we bought programs from studios and syndicators. Programs like The Jack LaLanne Show, which had to be one of the cheapest half hours of television ever filmed. A curtain, a couple of chairs, one camera, no edits, and Jack with an off-screen organist.
1 and 2 and 3, beginner stop.
Abbott and Costello produced a show specifically for syndication, featuring many of their old vaudeville bits.
Now keep your mouth shut.
All right, let's hear it.
Once upon a time, there was a whale.
What kind of a whale?
You asked for it, crisscrossed America to fulfill often strange requests from viewers. Old Roy Rogers and Gene Autry feature films were re-edited and turned into one-hour television shows. But for the first 30 years of KTVU's existence, the most popular programs, by far, were reruns of network shows that had already been seen on the other Bay Area stations.
I shudder to think of what would happen if he knew that you were watching.
Like today, the most popular genres were dramas.
You will know him as the fugitive.
Detective shows.
Never box with senior citizens. Burke's Law.
And half-hour sitcoms.
Laverne and Shirley, weeknights at 6:30. On Channel 2, there's only 1, 2.
Of the hundreds of off-network programs we ran, there were 2 success stories in the late 60s that foretold the bright future of KTVU and independent stations across the country. When we acquired I Love Lucy in 1968, the show had been rerunning for more than a decade on CBS. In fact, the network was still showing it in the morning when we began running it at night. But the program was a huge hit for us, and we televised it virtually non-stop for 25 years.
That's it.
Outpost 2 coming into sensor range, Captain.
Then there's Star Trek. During its first year on NBC, we agreed to broadcast reruns as soon as the show was canceled. We didn't have to wait long. After weak ratings over 3 network seasons, the program landed on our doorstep in 1969. Before long, the repeats developed a fanatical cult following, and the audience built from year to year. Amazing, considering that, due to its short network run, there were only 79 episodes of the show.
People don't care how many times they see it. I mean, with Star Trek, if you strip it, if you run it Monday through Friday, you're going to see repeats every 4 months. But they don't care.
This is Starfleet Command. You can't miss it, because there's only 1, 2.
The rules were changing. Tomorrow, the big gambles Channel 2 had to take, for better or worse. Bob Shaw for segment 2.
Back at where we were and where we've come in the past 40 years.
Live in color, panoramic sound. RCA Victor, big color TV.
By 1960, almost everyone had a television set and watched it 5 hours each day. Of the 4 stations in the Bay Area, KTVU, the only non-network station, was considered the runt of the litter, even though in some areas we were ahead of our time. Within 2 years of our 1958 sign-on, we were broadcasting films, shows, and specials in color. This at a time when ABC and CBS were almost entirely black and white. But we were only able to do so because some forward-thinking suppliers in the 50s spent the extra money to film their productions in color. They were the innovators, we weren't. Most of our programs were reruns of canceled network shows. Still, we weren't complaining. In the 60s and 70s, we made a lot of money with repeats.
The ship's aground on the shore of this uncharted desert isle.
Oddly enough, a number of shows became more popular in reruns than they were on the network. A lot of viewers didn't discover programs like Gilligan's Island or The Odd Couple until they appeared on Channel 2. In the early days, we pretty much had our pick of available shows, but as the years progressed, we had to compete with 3 new Bay Area independent stations, Channels 20, 44, and 36. So, we decided to break away from the pack.
There's only one tune.
We started to pursue as much original programming as possible.
We thought first-run shows would be more appealing than the 87th run of the old black and white sitcoms.
We were the first station in the Bay Area to run the Phil Donahue Show, back when it was the only program of its kind on the air.
We picked up Donahue, and nobody else in the market had room for it or didn't want it. It struggled for a long time. A lot of people didn't know what it was or why, they wanted to see I Love Lucy and they didn't care about Donahue.
Then we discovered the Bay Area's appetite for British productions and nature specials.
Upstairs, downstairs.
He's going to bring her back. Oh, mercy God.
We ran 6 Wives of Henry VIII and a lot of National Geographic specials, and enormously successful for us.
The Wild Dogs of Africa, the Wednesday night special at 8 on Channel 2.
Considering San Francisco's sophisticated image, the most surprising success was the Benny Hill Show, a program so raunchy we occasionally had to make edits.
They did frontal nudity in Benny Hill, and we didn't. Most of them were edited out, except a couple that they missed that our viewers caught on the air.
Open wide your window, dear.
And it was a wildly successful show. People just couldn't believe how silly he was.
Unfortunately, not all of our original shows were intentionally funny.
Inspired by actual case histories, crimes of passion.
Women in prison want just one thing. They want out.
It's good we'll be able to see more of each other.
How much more of me would you like to see?
I think you forgot something.
What?
A bathing suit?
Watch for me on Top of the Hill, right here on Channel 2.
And some were downright mortifying, despite record ratings.
I hope you've enjoyed the adventure of the chase.
Originals such as Dance Fever, Solid Gold, and Star Search had surprisingly long runs, but our biggest hits, the shows that really kicked KTVU into the big time, were, ironically, those same off-network reruns we were trying to get away from.
Join us this fall, right here on Channel 2.
We made so much money on MASH in those early days that we built a new building.
That's why they called KTVU the house that MASH built. Just how successful was MASH? Shattering a precedent, Channel 2 ran it twice each night, and the ratings were so high, the program paid for itself with the proceeds from just one commercial. Every other commercial was gravy.
I have never been witness to such a silly, soft...
Cheers was almost as successful, and currently Seinfeld is one of our most popular shows. The reason? All of these sitcoms followed the same pattern. In their early network years, their ratings were so low they were almost canceled. It took years, but each of them became the #1 show on television, by which point KTVU was televising their reruns. Since most of the show's fans had not seen the early episodes, Channel 2 reaped the rewards.
This is Captain Satellite calling Space Tower.
Tomorrow, KTVU's original must-see TV for kids. Bob Shaw for segment 2.
That brings back memories.
That's a lot.
We have more news still. While many people think of us as...
Every weekday, that is, at 12:30, we have what we call our Dialing for Dollars movie.
Dialing for Dollars was a Channel 2 institution for 23 years. Mel Venter started the show in 1967. A few years later, Pat McCormick took over, delivering afternoon movies and the promise of cash.
Congratulations to you.
The jackpots weren't huge.
A nice fat $200.
But each day, thousands of viewers stayed glued to the tube, expecting Pat to call them any second.
I could never understand why people would come up to me and say, you know, with real aggravation, "I've watched you for 9 years. Why haven't you called me?" Because there's 5.5 million people to call. Wake up.
Even though Dialing for Dollars ran some good pictures, the phone calls took time, so the films were often heavily edited. If you were a movie fan, it wasn't the best place to watch them, but KTVU gave you plenty of film-friendly venues for viewing the classics. Before cable TV and video players, there were only 2 places to watch movies, in theaters or on television. And in the 70s and early 80s, KTVU was the best place to watch movies on TV.
That was the one thing that kind of set the independent stations apart from the affiliates in those days. We presented a movie every night. We were the movie station.
We ran the most movies, up to 20 or more a week, and we ran the best movies.
The Odd Couple.
But what really set us apart from the other stations was the way we ran the movies.
Our whole image was centered around being a movie station, having the best prints, the best editing.
Channel 2 was the first station to commit extra time, money, and manpower to ensure our film presentations would be free of the scratches, splices, and color problems often seen elsewhere.
The normal feature that would come in here would be rejected out of hand.
And KTVU was the first Bay Area station to broadcast uncut, R-rated versions of award-winning movies like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
We weren't going to edit it. It went on the air with all of its language intact. Nobody complained that I can recall at all. But San Francisco's always been a pretty sophisticated audience anyway.
Channel 2 was the only station in the country to broadcast the acclaimed film Walkabout in prime time with its full frontal nudity intact.
Over time, we really kind of pushed the envelope, if you will. It wasn't to offend, it was more to present a movie in its original form.
I mean, I got a crazy blood type, but it's almost impossible to match.
Of course, not all of the 1,700 films in the Channel 2 library were 4-star classics, but KTVU gave you a good excuse to watch even the worst movies. Some of the worst movies ever made appeared on the late-night program Creature Features, but viewers would watch them over and over again to see what host Bob Wilkins would say next.
This movie is so bad that it was delivered to Channel 2 in a brown paper bag.
Wilkins' show included interviews with science fiction and horror stars, as well as regular folks no one else would put on the air.
Have you ever met other people who are from other planets on the street?
Constantly.
Wilkins hosted Creature Features from 1971 to 1979. After seeing far too many killer plants, crawling hands, and enemies from space, he turned the show over to John Stanley.
You ever try to live with a gorilla?
The movies didn't get any better, but the caliber of guests improved.
Well, I've been very grateful to have the opportunity to do all that work.
Tonight at 11:30, right after the rock show.
Creature Features was canceled in 1984, partly because obtaining films, good or bad, was getting more difficult for broadcasters like us due to cable movie channels that were eating up product. Channel 2's days as the movie station were numbered, and the most radical step in its evolution was about to begin. That story tomorrow. Bob Shaw for segment 2.
Well, we have more news.